The wind came first. Not a howling wind, nor a storming one, but a strange, whispering breeze that curled through the trees like it carried secrets. Leaves lifted without falling. Flowers turned their faces, not to the sun, but toward the center of the old village square, where a hat, yes, just a hat, lay upside down on the cobblestones. It had not been there moments ago. Children stopped their skipping ropes. A cat froze mid-pounce. Even the fountain, which usually babbled without pause, seemed to hush as the hat gave a gentle twitch, as if something inside had stirred. It was no ordinary hat. Tall and floppy, with a brim so wide it could shade a picnic, it shimmered faintly with threads of silver and blue, though no hand had sewn them in. From behind window panes and market stalls, curious eyes peeked, but no one stepped forward, not yet. Not until a small figure, no taller than a tree stump, wandered into view. His name was Leo, and he was looking for something. Not treasure, not sweets, not even adventure at least. Not the kind he knew. He was looking for an answer. The kind of answer that doesn't come in books or from grown-ups. The kind that only shows itself when the world is very quiet and very strange. As he approached the mysterious hat, the air seemed to thicken like syrup. Leo's fingers tingled. A flock of crows rose all at once from the rooftops, wings slicing the silence. The hat trembled again. And just like that, without a sound, the wind stopped. But the hat began to hum. Leo took one cautious step closer. His heart pattered like rain on a rooftop, but his feet did not stop. The hum coming from the hat was low and soothing, almost like a lullaby made of wind and moonlight. It didn't sound dangerous. It sounded curious, as if the hat itself was wondering who Leo was. He knelt beside it. The brim curled slightly, as if noticing him. His fingers hovered, then slowly reached out and brushed the fabric. It felt like warm velvet, soft as sleep, and in that instant, the world tilted. With a blink, Leo found himself not in the village square, but standing on a giant checkerboard floor under a sky filled with floating candles. Shelves towered around him, filled not with books, but with glowing bubbles that pulsed gently like jellyfish in the sea. A sign dangled from nowhere above welcome to the hat of hidden wise. A gentle breeze nudged him forward. He walked carefully, passing bubbles labeled with strange words. Why are yawns catching? Why do dreams vanish when we wake? Why does a heart feel heavy when it's sad? Each bubble seemed to whisper as he passed. Their voices tickled his ears but were gone before he could catch their meaning. A tiny staircase unfolded ahead of him, made of puzzle pieces that clicked into place beneath his feet. And at the top, seated in a floating chair made of twigs and stars, was someone or something. It was not quite a person. It had the shape of one, but its body shimmered like puddles after rain. A long cloak flowed from its shoulders, stitched with shooting stars and question marks. On its head sat another enormous hat, just like the one Leo had touched. This was the hat keeper. The hat keeper didn't speak, but Leo somehow understood. He had entered the Hat of Hidden Wise because he carried a question in his heart. Not just any question, but one that had grown heavy with time, like a pebble in a pocket. One that needed an answer. Leo swallowed hard. He did have a question. One he'd carried quietly, even when no one listened. Why did his father leave? Not just why he went away, but why he hadn't come back. Why his letters stopped. Why the chair at the dinner table stayed empty. The hat keeper's eyes, if they were eyes, blinked slowly. Then it raised one finger and pointed. From the shelves, a bubble floated down and hovered in front of Leo. It glowed pale green, and inside it, a soft image swirled his father, smiling, walking through a forest with a satchel on his back. Then another image, of a storm, and a bridge, and a path that split into two. His father paused, unsure, and then turned the other way. The bubble popped gently. Leo's chest tightened. It wasn't a full answer. Not words, not reasons, but somehow he knew. His father had gotten lost, not in the woods, but in the worry, in the fear of not being enough. He hadn't meant to vanish, but he hadn't known how to come back. Tears prickled in Leo's eyes, though he didn't quite cry. The hat keeper nodded, slowly, as if to say, "Now you understand." and then it waved a hand, and the checkerboard floor dissolved beneath Leo's feet. He landed gently, as if dropped by a feather, back in the village square. The hat lay before him, motionless now, its humming gone. But something had changed. Leo stood taller, not because he was braver or older, but because he had held a question in his heart and dared to ask it even when the answer wasn't easy. The village square had returned to its usual quiet, but Leo wasn't alone. A girl with bright eyes and tangled hair was crouched nearby. Her name was Mira, and she had been watching from behind a barrel. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Instead, she stepped forward and pointed to the hat. It trembled again, then rolled a few inches toward her. Mira didn't hesitate. She reached out, her fingers brushing the fabric, and whoosh, the wind returned. Leo gasped as Mira vanished. Inside the hat of hidden wise, Mira stood wide-eyed beneath the floating candles. She didn't look around. She knew why she was there. Her question was sharp and simple. Why don't the other children play with me? The hat keeper appeared again, seated in its chair of stars. It raised a hand, and another bubble floated down, glowing a gentle blue. Inside, Mira saw flashes her own face, sometimes too serious, sometimes too loud. Children turning away, not because they disliked her, but because they didn't understand her quiet thoughts or her wild questions. They didn't know how to be her friend, and she didn't know how to show them. The bubble popped with a soft shimmer. When she returned to the village square, her shoulders had changed shape. Not heavier, but more open, like a door pushed ajar. Leo was still there. He offered a crooked smile, and without speaking, they sat beside the hat together. Word spread. Children came one by one. Some tiptoed, some skipped. Each came with a question. Some were small, like, why do fireflies glow? Others were huge, like, why do people stop loving each other? Each time, the hat responded. Always in its own way, bubbles, images, feelings that said more than words could hold. No question was too silly or too sad. And though the answers were not always complete, they were always true. One day, a boy named Javi came. He did not want to touch the hat. He wanted to break it. He shouted that it was tricking everyone. That answer should be loud, not quiet. That the world didn't need wonder, only rules. The hat stayed still. Javi kicked it, but it rolled softly away. Mira stood up. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny stone, round and smooth, which the hat had given her during her visit. She offered it to Javi. He didn't take it, not at first. But when Leo stepped forward and placed his own hand on Javi's shoulder, something changed. Javi's anger quieted, his fists uncurled. Then, without another word, he touched the hat. He didn't vanish like the others. Instead, the wind circled only him, whispering gently. His eyes fluttered closed. A bubble rose beside him, but it stayed sealed. Whatever answer it carried was for him alone. When he opened his eyes, he said nothing. But he sat down beside Leo and Mira, his shoulders softer than before. The hat stayed in the square for 7 days and 7 nights. People began to leave drawings and notes beside it. Some left tiny things from their pockets, buttons, feathers, ribbons. No one tried to own it. They just came, asked, listened, and left a little lighter. On the 8th morning, the wind returned, louder now, carrying the scent of cinnamon and old stories. The hat lifted off the cobblestones, rose high into the sky, and twirled once before, vanishing into the clouds. It did not return. But the square was never quite the same. Children spoke more kindly to each other. Grown-ups listened a little longer. And sometimes, when the wind rustled through the trees in just the right way, people swore they could hear a faint humming, like the whisper of a question waiting to be answered. Leo still kept a feather in his pocket, smooth and pale blue. Mira wore a bracelet of wooden beads, one of which sparkled like starlight. And Javi, once so loud with anger, grew quieter but stronger. Because the answers had never really come from the hat. They had come from listening, from wondering, from being brave enough to ask. The wind returned. Months later, in the middle of a silent night, Leo awoke with a start. His window creaked open, though he remembered locking it. Outside, the stars pulsed brighter than usual, and in the center of the village square, a shadow danced. Not quite a shape, Not quite a person, more like a swirl of ink caught in moonlight. Mira appeared moments later, wrapped in her blanket, her eyes wide and unblinking. Javi followed, barefoot, as if he had known all along this night would come. The hat was back. But it looked different. Its brim was torn, its color dim, it no longer shimmered, and when Leo stepped closer, there was no hum. The hat of hidden whys had returned, but something was wrong. From behind darkened windows, a few villagers watched. No one dared come out. Only the three children stood in the square, feeling the stillness press around them like thick fog. Then, a sound faint, like a distant weeping, rose from the hat. Mira gasped. Leo's hand tightened into a fist. Javi knelt beside the hat and placed his ear near it. And that's when he heard the voices. Not just one, but hundreds. Twisting together, overlapping, not speaking words, but asking. Endless questions, tangled and heavy. Why did she leave? Why did he say that? Why didn't I try harder? Why am I so afraid? Javi staggered back. The hat was full, but not with answers. This time, it overflowed with too many questions, too many voices all at once. It had gathered the worries and wounds of everyone it had ever helped, but no one had answered it. It had become a vessel too full to float. Mira touched the brim. Her fingers recoiled from the cold. The hat pulsed once, and a wave of whispering air blasted outward, knocking the three children onto their backs. When they stood again, the world had changed. The village square was gone. In its place stretched a barren plain under a sky of swirling gray. The ground cracked beneath their feet. The candles from the hatkeeper's realm flickered overhead, but their flames were dim, shivering. The shelves of glowing bubbles were shattered. Their glass had splintered across the ground like ice, and inside the broken fragments, trapped images trembled. Leo saw his father again, standing at the split path, but this time turning in circles, lost and confused. Mira saw herself alone on a swing, looking at children laughing in the distance. Javi saw a storm swallowing his home, his own reflection standing still in the rain, unable to move. The children realized they were no longer visitors. They had become part of the hat. A groan echoed from above as the hatkeeper descended. But now it was frail, its starry cloak frayed, its chair of twigs cracked down the middle. It looked at them, not with blame, but with sorrow. This world had been built from questions, yes, but questions need care. When no one listens, when no one answers, even the most magical things begin to crumble. Leo stepped forward. He felt his chest twist again, but not from fear, from knowing. The hat had helped them, given pieces of truth, opened hidden doors, but none of them had ever asked, "What does the hat need?" He knelt beside the shattered shelf and picked up a fragment. The image of his father flickered inside. The path split, the forest swayed, and his father's face looked so tired. Leo whispered not with his mouth, but with his heart. "You didn't mean to leave. You didn't know how to stay. But I'm okay now. I miss you, but I'm okay." The image stilled. It no longer spun. Slowly, the shard glowed, and the glass melted into a single drop of light, which floated gently into the air and joined one of the dim candles. That flame grew brighter. Mira understood. She gathered a fragment showing herself, sitting alone. This time, she whispered, "It's okay that I'm different. I can still try. I won't stop trying." Another drop of light. Another candle sparked. Javi, too, found his image. The storm was still raging, but he stood taller now. "I'm not broken," he whispered. "I'm learning, and I want to grow." With each whisper, the broken bubbles mended. The shelves rose, straightened. The sky shifted from gray to silver. The hatkeeper, watching, stood taller. But it wasn't enough. The hat, resting in the center of this world, was still cracked. The voices still spilled out, thousands of them. Not all could be answered by three children. There were too many. That's when Leo had an idea. They couldn't stop the questions. But maybe they could catch them, listen to them, hold them with care so they didn't get lost. He turned to the others. Without speaking, they each placed their hands on the brim of the hat, and they remembered. They remembered each question they had heard. From friends, from family, from strangers. Questions of love and loss, of bravery and fear. They let those questions settle in their hearts not to solve them, but to honor them. The hat began to glow again, softly this time. Not with magic that dazzled, but with warmth, like sunlight through curtains. The torn brim began to mend, thread by thread, stitched with the memories of kindness and truth. One by one, the candles lit fully. The shelves sparkled. The hat keeper rose into the air, no longer broken. Its cloak flowed wide and bright, covered not in stars now, but in words, simple, gentle words. I hear you. You matter. It's okay. And then, the hat lifted. The world spun gently around them, and they were standing once more in the village square, the sky above them full of stars. The hat hovered a moment longer, then floated into the air and burst not into pieces, but into thousands of tiny lights that drifted outward, like fireflies on a summer night. Each light carried a question and the space to hold it. Leo looked at Mira. Mira looked at Javi. None of them spoke. They didn't need to, because the truth they had found wasn't just about getting answers. It was about being an answer. Being the person who listens, who understands, who chooses kindness even when the world is quiet. And somewhere far away, a whisper traveled through the wind. Not all questions are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be shared. Morning came soft and golden, with dew on the grass and a stillness that felt almost sacred. Birds chirped hesitantly at first, as if checking whether the world was safe again. The village square, once quiet and ordinary, now shimmered faintly with something new, something invisible but warm, like the memory of a hug. The hat was gone. Not a scrap remained. No brim, no shimmer, not even a thread. But in its place stood something else. A circle of smooth stones, laid perfectly on the cobblestones, each one carved with tiny marks, swirls, stars, question marks, and hearts. Children came slowly, tiptoeing, peeking from behind corners. When they saw Leo, Mira, and Javi sitting peacefully in the center of the stone ring, their fear melted like frost in sunshine. They didn't ask what had happened. They sat beside them, one by one. No one spoke, but something gentle moved between them. A shared understanding, a quiet knowing. And then, without being told, they began to build. With chalk, with pebbles, with twigs, and colored string, they decorated the ring. Someone brought a feather, someone else a shell. A tiny boy placed a pebble shaped like a teardrop in the center and patted it softly, as if tucking it in. From that day on, the village square was never just a square. It became a listening place. People came not to speak loudly, but to sit quietly. Children would gather there after school, not always to play, but to draw shapes in the dirt or write questions on folded paper and slip them under stones. Sometimes, someone else would find the question and leave a drawing, a smiley face, or a simple answer like me too. It became something bigger than magic. It became community. Leo started carrying a small notebook. He didn't write poems or stories, but questions. Why do we forget some dreams but not others? Why do goodbyes hurt, even when we know they're coming? Why do stars make us feel small, but safe? He didn't expect answers. He just liked holding the questions. Mira became a quiet helper. When she saw someone sitting alone, she'd sit with them, drawing spirals in the dirt. Sometimes she'd hum. She never pushed, never asked. But somehow, her being there made others feel brave enough to speak. And Javi, once quick to anger, became the protector of the ring. When someone tried to make fun or shout too loud, Javi would stand in the middle, arms folded, eyes calm. He didn't need to say much. His presence reminded everyone of what the place was meant to be. Seasons turned. The leaves blushed red and gold, then fell away. Snow blanketed the stones, but children came anyway, sweeping the ring clean with mittened hands. Spring brought flowers blooming along the edges, as if the ground remembered. Years passed. Some children grew taller, moved away, followed their own winding paths. But whenever they returned, even if only for a visit, they always stepped into the circle first. They always sat, always remembered. One evening, long after the first return of the hat, a young girl with big eyes and muddy shoes came to the ring. She didn't know its story. She only knew her chest felt full of things she couldn't name. Her feet led her there as if pulled by strings of starlight. She sat in the center, curled like a question mark. The sky above deepened to indigo. The village quieted, and just as her breath caught in her throat, the wind stirred gently. It curled around her, not cold, not hot, just right. She looked up. A tiny light hovered above her, a flicker, no bigger than a firefly, glowing soft and golden. It danced once, twice, then drifted down to land on her hand. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She smiled. Because even if she didn't understand, even if she didn't have words, she felt seen. She whispered a question into the wind. The light pulsed once, then gently floated away, rising into the sky like a bubble made of hope. And high above, among the clouds and stars, 1,000 tiny lights answered back. Not with words, but with warmth, with wonder, with love. And so the story of the hat never really ended. It lived on not in fabric or magic, but in every child who dared to ask, every heart that chose to listen, and every soul brave enough to hold questions gently, like treasures. Because the greatest answers aren't always the ones we speak. Sometimes, the answer is the space we create, the quiet, the care, the listening, and the light we leave behind.